Investing gives me such a thrill because whenever I put that money aside to buy, in my TFSA, I know that I'm not just buying a stock, I'm buying freedom. I'm literally buying years of my life that I will be able to eventually retire, sit on a beach if I want to, and just collect dividends. That is really the name of the game. Investing consistently and try to increase your investment rate. Being goal-oriented is essential in all areas of life, especially career and personal finance and entrepreneurship. You asked me, has my mindset changed? Absolutely, it has changed. I've definitely learned some lessons along the way. Maybe not as extreme shifts as people like Brandon Beavis, right? Their whole investing philosophy turned on a dime when he had kids. Now he has 2 daughters, right? So he doesn't have the luxury of time to do the investments and do like the research to pick individual stocks. That's really how my YouTube channel started. It was mainly a way to kind of teach the new batch of co-ops coming in. Never expected anyone else to subscribe other than my students and my friends and family. Literally, I've had that same Excel file that I've updated over the years. I've changed the format, but that's been the single most pivotal change in the way I think about money, right? Because until you really know where your money's going, you're not going to be able to make a change. Having a business gives you those benefits that you wouldn't normally get being a fully salaried employee. Mo, people like you will sit down and respond to like almost every single comment on Blossom. And I know better than most how much time that takes. And I know you know more than most, like how much the new users, the new investors appreciate that. Having someone sit down and take the time to actually respond to the questions in a patient and understanding way, not a condescending or judgy way like, oh, what, you don't know that? How do you not know that?
Hello everyone and welcome to Momentum Finance channel. Today I'm super honored to be welcoming the man that doesn't need introduction, the one and only Canadian in a t-shirt. Welcome to the show, Adrian.
Thanks, Mo. Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming, but I'm so glad that we managed to make it work. And thank you so much for accepting my invite. It really means so much to me.
No, Mo, I've said this before, but we met in Calgary a few months ago on the Blossom tour. And
right.
Mo, you are like the best example that I can point to towards what the Blossom community, the ideals that we strive towards, right? You're always so supportive. You're always so welcoming to beginners and more experienced investors. I always point to people as being like, hey, if you want to see what Blossom's like, look at people like Mo, right?
I
So thank you
appreciate
for
that.
everything you do. Thank you for being like a pillar of the community. And I'm happy to be part of your show.
I really appreciate that, man. That means so much, especially coming from you.
It's the truth.
Like I said, Canadian T-shirt is a man that doesn't require any introduction. He has hundreds of thousands of followers who get value a lot from his content. He has millions of views across multiple channels. But as it goes with the type of this podcast, I always want to have my guests to have a chance to still provide a quick introduction of themselves. Sure. That's best always to be done that way. So, Adrian, why don't you give us a quick rundown of who you are, and then I'll get going from there with the rest of the questions.
Sounds good. All right. Hey guys, it's Adrian here, the Canadian in a t-shirt. So that's my iconic opening I start every video with. So yes, my name is Adrian Barr, also known as the Canadian in a t-shirt. I started this YouTube channel getting close to 7 years ago now. Back then, one of the reasons why I started was because I was really inspired by a lot of the Canadian pioneers. I've made even whole videos talking about my inspirations, my influences. People like Brandon Beavis, Jessica Morehouse, Ben Felix, Plain Bagel. They were the first real Canadian voices we had. But to be honest, other than Jessica and Brandon, Plain Bagel and Ben Felix weren't even... Most people didn't even know they were Canadian, right? They were mainly targeting a universal market audience. Right. And mainly the US audience, because, they are 10 times our population, right? So when I started, there really wasn't a lot of Canadian content. There were other big creators. There was the Graham Steffens, Andre Jakes, Investing with Jeremy, those kind of guys. But they were always American focused, and all of their topics, whether it was investing advice, tax advice, was always US focused, because that's what their audience was. For Canadians, it was really just Jessica Morehouse and Brandon Beavis. So they really kind of inspired me to be like, hey, if they could do it, and I agree with, 95% of what Brandon was saying, what Jessica was saying, but I also had my own take on certain topics, and I really wanted to kind of, share my lessons of the things I learned when I started investing, the mistakes I made, the tax planning strategies that I've been using for decades at this point. So that's why I really want to focus on the Canadian aspect of it, hence the name Canadian in a t-shirt. And the second half, just because, I'm not some fancy guy in an office wearing a fancy suit, right? I'm not like classically educated. I don't particularly work in the finance industry. I kind of just did it as a side hobby, right? So that's why the second half of my name in the t-shirt comes from, because I'm just an average guy. I'm not all that special. I like to think I'm a good communicator and I'm a good teacher, but I'm not like a PhD in economics or anything like that. And I'm not gonna try to like make myself sound more smart than I am by using confusing words or fancy acronyms. I'm just an average Canadian, an average guy, giving it to you straight, speaking in plain language, hopefully that anyone can resonate with and anyone can understand, even if you're an absolute beginner. So that's kind of where I started my channel about 7 years ago. And again, I started purely as a hobby, right? Never expected to gain any audience or gain any traction. And now here we are 7 years later. It's my full-time career. I do this as a living now.
That's
So
amazing how it all came full circle. And early on, Adrian, I think when you were deciding on pursuing your education at university, did you go to physics or something
no,
along
no.
those?
So I went to. So I'm 33 years old now. So well, no, sorry, I'm scratch that. I recently turned 34, which is hard for me to
That's
believe, but
amazing.
that's life, right?
You look very
So
young for sure.
thank you. Well, the gray hair would say otherwise. But no. So I went to university. So I've been a
Yeah.
nerd all my life, right? Always been super academic. Always wanted to get the highest grades. But that's something my parents really kind of hammered
Hmm.
home that lesson, right? If I got a 99% on a math test, my dad would be like, "What happened to that 1%? Like, where'd you screw up?" Right? So that was kind of the mentality growing up, which was great for me. It made me, very
Push
competitive and
yourself.
really want to work hard. But yeah, so I was always a nerd, huge nerd. So I went to the nerdiest school in Canada and I studied the nerdiest thing possible, mathematical physics with a minor of biophysics at the
Wow.
University of Waterloo. And I loved it. Don't get me wrong. Like I love advanced mathematics. I loved quantum mechanics. I loved relativity. I loved advanced physics, advanced particle theory. So I loved that stuff. And my initial goal was to be a quantum physics professor. But then, I mean, hey, my mom got really sick. She was in the hospital for a couple of years. So then I wanted to, after that, that kind of inspired me to do a 180 and go into more of the medical field, hence my minor in biophysics. And then my new goal was, well, I wanted to become a cardiac surgeon. So I pursued that for a few
Amazing.
years, went back to school, decided it wasn't for me, dropped out of grad school at that point, and then went back to work, became a software engineering architect, designed a
Yeah.
digital vehicle management system for this big company. Then I became an AI engineer for many years,
No way.
and I loved that job. It was the best. It was the best job ever. I was really at the cutting edge of the AI sector, leading dozens of AI projects at a healthcare company. So we were doing good things with AI. We were using
Yeah.
AI
Wow.
to
For
solve traditional
yeah.
problems in the healthcare space, right?
That's amazing.
So I love the job. And then while I was doing that job, kind of brings us back to the first question. Like while I was doing that job, I was responsible for hiring and managing about, let's say, 20 co-op students a semester. And every new batch of co-ops, what I would do is I would like to do these like lunch and learn sessions where every Thursday I would sit them down and teach them career advice, how to write a resume, how to interview properly, and finance advice, right? How do taxes work? How do investing work? How does a credit card statement work, right? And these students, some of them were like 19, some of them were like 24, right? But even then, even the older ones, no one had ever taught them these things. And their eyes lit up when I taught them like how a credit card works. You don't have a free grace period. If you don't pay your monthly statement, you get charged interest right away, right? And most of the students never learned that. They learned the
Yeah.
opposite, right? So I started to realize, hey, with each semester, each batch of students, I'm kind of giving the same speeches, the same lessons. So why not, instead of just repeating myself every couple of months, why not, make videos, post them online, and I could just kind of share them that way. So that's really how my YouTube channel started. It was mainly a way to kind of teach the new batch of co-ops coming in. Never expected anyone else to subscribe other than my students and my friends and family, right? And then I still remember, this is probably about maybe like a week or two in, my first stranger who subscribed to me, his name was German Commando. Never met the guy. Maybe I never will. But he was the first person who subscribed to my channel who I didn't know in real life, right? And I'm like, wow, that is cool.
That's a
Like
connection.
someone
Yeah.
found me and liked my videos and decided to hit subscribe. So from there, I just, I fell in love. It was a hobby. It was a passion project right from the beginning. I never expected to make a career out of it, but I kept being consistent. I kept engaging with my audience. I took a point of pride to respond to every single comment, right? And I still
That's
do
amazing.
today.
Yeah.
And here we are 7 years later. Now I'm on tour with
That's
my
amazing.
heroes like Brandon Beavis, Ben Felix, Jessica Morales, Plain Bagel, right? I got to meet great people like you. I'm honored to say that I myself have inspired the new generation of
100%.
YouTubers and creators the way that Brandon and Jessica and those people inspired me. So like you said earlier, it's really been an amazing and unexpected kind of full circle moment where
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm very grateful for all the support I've gotten through my audience, through people. I literally have people in my comments that I've never met in person, but they've been with me for 7 years. And I don't know their faces, but I know their usernames. And I know so much about their lives and their goals because we've had this relationship for all these years.
It's just incredible, Adrian. I would say, one thing when I met you in Calgary event last
Mhm.
summer, one thing that stood out for me was like, honestly, you're such a nice person on
Thank you.
videos. Like and you're an excellent communicator. I love the passion that comes through from the videos, but I think
I'm too passionate, I've been told.
it's amazing. But once somebody meets you in person, it's amazing how genuine you're not on camera, but also in person. Like you're the exact same person. I love
True.
how engaged you're. I remember we were in a small huddle. We were talking to some folks. Whether you've met them in the past or not, you speak to the people the same way. Like you treat everybody like for the valuable human being they are. And I love that about you. I think it's just so incredible. We are so honored that we have honestly, you're one of the greatest of all times when it comes to
Oh,
this space
thank
for
you.
me, for sure. Absolutely. So I appreciate that. I want
Thanks,
to ask
bro.
you, Adrian, one quick question though. At
Sure.
what point, because there might be a lot of folks watching this video, and whether it's finance or any other field that they are pursuing, they might say, you know what, entrepreneurship, I'm not sure if it's for me or not. What made that decision point for you? Like, oh, you know what, I think this is essentially can become a career for me.
Yeah. So for me, it wasn't really like a single pivotal moment. It's really just been part of my life since first year university. So when I went to university, I had luckily, I was a really good student, so I had a lot of scholarships, right? But we didn't come from a rich family or anything, right? So like I had to, like most, like maybe not most, but like a lot of students that I knew, I had to work multiple jobs, in the background, right? So I would work at the library, I would work for different faculties, I would do a lot of contract work. I was working as a tutor for man, almost like 12 years, even after university. I was working as a software contract developer, doing like freelance software jobs. I'd also do various other kind of jobs around
Yeah,
campus or
small,
even
small.
around campus, right? So that was always very rarely were those actually like salary positions. They were usually contract work, right? So by its very nature, I was already kind of running a sole proprietorship business even before I really understood all the
Interesting.
nuances of running a business. But
Yeah.
I always had that was always a part of my life, working side hustles, working different side gigs. And with that, having the flexibility of making my own schedule, having the responsibility of finding my own clients, finding my own work. And then soon enough, I learned the responsibility of managing your finances and reporting your taxable income. Even if you're a student making very little income, it's you're it's unlikely that you'll be paying a significant tax bill because of the basic personal tax amount, and you'll be in the lowest tax bracket anyway. But if you work enough, you probably will exceed that threshold, and then you'll finally have to file business taxes for the first time. So for me, that was a huge eye-opening experience at the end of first year university, where on top of my regular studies that everyone else was doing, I basically read the Canadian tax code. I mean, for fun, but also because I knew how hard I worked for my money. I knew how hard I
Mm,
managed my time. And I was thinking, if I'm going to bust my ass, or sorry, if I'm going to work my butt off to maximize every dollar and save every dollar and work as hard as I can to maximize my revenue, I don't want to be throwing any money way down the toilet in fees or penalties or overpaying in taxes. I want to, build a strategy to kind of maximize the taxable benefits I do get for running a business and, make my money work the best for me, right? It's kind of like, I work hard for my money, so I want my money working just as hard for me. That was the
100%.
kind of the main incentive for me to really maximize my knowledge of the tax code and make it work for me. And with that, I realized that pretty early on, like having a business gives you those benefits that you wouldn't normally get being a fully salaried employee, right? And even though for the next 10 years after that, I always was a salaried employee, I always had a full-time job. But in addition to that, I would always have one or two, sometimes even three different side businesses as a sole proprietorship business. So there wasn't really the one moment where I had like a light bulb
Gotcha.
click. It
Yeah.
was mainly a series of realizations that, hey, it's good to have a 9 to 5. I mean, it's almost essential for most people to have a 9 to 5 to get that stability, to get those benefits like insurance plan, dental plan, have that peace of mind knowing that you have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks, every month, whatever it is. But if you are, let's say younger, you don't have kids, you don't have the responsibility of a family depending on you, and you have a little bit of time on your hands, I mean, I was able to pay off my student loans in a matter of like about a year and a half
Wow.
because I was running all these multiple
Yeah.
side businesses, right? Whereas I have some friends who they're 33, 32 years old now, and they're still paying off their student loans because they've only been relying on their sole source of income. And they're good with their money. They manage their expenses, but if you only have one source of income, there's only so much you can really save, right? If you are young and you have the flexibility of time, doing one or two side businesses, it is going to take sacrifices. You're going to have to give up evenings. You're going to have to give up weekends, right? But it can really make an impact. It can jumpstart you paying off those debts, whether you have credit card debt or student loan debt, and it
Sure.
can really jumpstart your investing journey. And for me, that was you're asking me, like, is there a moment that kind of realized that entrepreneurship was for me? It was really when I realized that I was able to comfortably afford all of my living expenses as a student and beyond, but I could really start putting money aside and start
Mm.
investing in the stock market years before my friends were even like talking about it or thinking of that as an option, right? And with investing, I'm sure like the greatest ally you have in investing is time. And if you start earlier, I mean, I was lucky. I started at the age of like maybe 23, 24, which in my friend group was super early.
Yeah.
Now that we're in the Blossom community,
Yeah.
we're talking to like 16-year-olds,
Yeah.
17-year-olds who are already starting investing. And I'm blown away. I'm like, I'm so jealous. I wish I started when I was 17. But
Yeah.
back then, we're talking like,
Yeah.
12 years ago at this point, there were investing was not a
Right.
common thing. I was literally the first one in my friend group who ever invested in the stock market that I know of, right? And I had no one to talk to about it. I had no one to ask questions for. But because I had multiple side businesses and multiple avenues of income, even though I was always stressed for money and I was always living super, super cheap. Like I could show you some stories of how extremes I went to save money. But because I was able to kind of keep my expenses low and I was always had multiple streams of income, I was able to start investing at a relatively young age back
Yeah.
then. And, people always ask me like, oh, what's your secret? Like, no, they see my portfolio. They're like, oh my God, you look like you've done so well. I have no secret. I just started early, right? I've been investing for over a decade now. And like if you look at my stock portfolio, there might be a few like, rare times where I've kind of outsmarted the market or bet at the right time, right? Most of the time it's just boring companies, boring, broad,
Market
diversified
returns.
ETF.
Yeah.
Time is really the one that's been doing all the work, doing all the heavy lifting. I invested early, I invested consistently, and I let time do work its magic. That's the secret.
And Adrian, has your investment style changed over the years? I know from your bio, you started investing back in 2014-ish or so. At least
Yes.
that's when you bought your first stock. And
Yes.
then from there onwards, it seems like even from your post, dividends still play a part. You
Oh,
reinvest all of your
absolutely.
dividends back through DRIP, like a dividend
Hmm.
reinvestment plans. Has it evolved overall though?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been lucky because even when I started, even when I was a young man, right, I never had that itch to like, maximize profits, chase the highest things, go for high risk, high reward. I was like, nah, gambling never really did much for me. I played a little bit of blackjack here and there when we went on a trip or something. But when I'm talking blackjack, I mean, I walk in with $20. If I lose $20,
Just for
I'm going
fun.
out the door.
Yeah.
I'm going home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Other people my age were like, no, they were into sports betting. They were into like the risky things. They were into, and once like crypto and NFTs came out, I had a
Yeah.
lot of my younger friends who were just going all in on that. Like they were saying like, oh, I'm going 80% of my portfolio is in Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, dude, that's crazy. That's like, I hope you're right. I hope it works out for you. But I would never put 80% of my portfolio into anything, let alone a speculative asset like crypto, right? So even early on, I was always a pretty, I would say, conservative investor. I never expected to be like, oh, I'm going to chase the highest things. I want to make my money. That was never my goal, right? Ironically, I actually did have I mean, with NVIDIA, I could probably share that story later, but like I was able to almost 10x my money with NVIDIA, mainly because I was working in the AI industry before NVIDIA really blew up. So I kind of had a very early
No.
professional
Yeah.
relationship with the company.
Yeah.
That's why I had that kind of conviction. But I would say overall, even from day one, I invested in just the blue chip, reliable companies. I think my first stocks were Coca-Cola, TD, Dollarama, Enbridge, RioCan, Smart Centers, and Fortis. Yeah, so I had a good mix
Yeah.
of like Canadian, US companies, large multi-cap billion-dollar companies, right? Diversified across different sectors and various ETFs as well. I think a VOO and XIC, I believe, were my first two. So again, nothing crazy, nothing specialized, just looking at the big players, diversified portfolio. And that mentality kind of just carried on for years and decades. Now, you asked me, has my mindset changed? Absolutely, it has changed. I've definitely learned some lessons along the way. Maybe not as extreme shifts as people like Brandon Beavis, right? Their whole investing philosophy turned on a dime
Yeah.
when he had kids. Now he has two daughters,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
he doesn't have the luxury of time to do the investments and do like the research to pick individual stocks. So he went from an all stock portfolio into an all ETF portfolio. I never really had that dramatic lifestyle change. So I've always kind of been, roughly half my portfolio is individual stocks, the other half is in ETFs. And again, about half US, half Canada, half dividend, half growth focused. I've always been like a hybrid investor, I don't want to go all in on one school of thought versus the other. I do a hybrid mix. But in terms of some changes, like I could share one thing. For the first maybe like 7 or 8 years of my investing journey, I was exclusively invested in the Canadian market and the US market. I had very little, if any, international exposure, right? Obviously, some of the companies I invested in were multinational companies. They had revenue from Asia, Europe, etc. But I didn't really have any, European home-based companies or Asian companies, right? And I didn't really want to buy those individual stocks because I'm sure like buying on the London stock market or the Frankfurt stock market or whatever, those are expensive. They come with huge commission fees, large conversion, considerations to deal with, right? So I learned probably about 7 or 8 years into my investing strategy how to use international ETFs, right? So ETFs in Canadian dollars or US dollars that would do the heavy work for you and invest in, emerging markets in Taiwan or Brazil or India, or more established foreign markets like Germany, Australia, Japan, etc., right? So that way I didn't really have to kind of pick and choose and be and worry about, you know, foreign policy changing or
Mhm.
governments changing their international trading laws, right? There's a lot of nuances. I mean, buying Canadian and US companies is hard enough in terms of doing the research. Buying a Chinese company where the Chinese government can change foreign policy, or the Canadian or US government can change foreign policy and install a 250% tariff on China
Yeah.
overnight, right? So I don't want to deal with that kind of risk and that kind of level of an extra level of research. I would rather do those kind of international ETFs that kind of do the work for me and build a built-in diversified
Yes.
portfolio of foreign stocks. So that's something I've definitely changed over the years. And now I think I put about 20% of my portfolio is in international holdings. And then I do 40 Canadian, 40 US. That's kind of my split going
Your
forward.
yeah.
Maybe that will change as the years go by, but it's been good for the past couple of while.
Do you have some exposure to crypto or very,
I
very
have a
minimal or
little bit.
none? Very minimal? Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And I know you are obviously, Adrian, as a whole, um, I don't know if I can call you angel investor, but essentially you do invest in some businesses potentially, like Blossom
Yes.
for sure as being
My
one of
biggest
them.
investment was
Yeah.
Blossom. Yes.
Yeah. That's incredible. That's so amazing. I want to go back to the point that you made around, frugality. I know early
Yeah.
on, obviously you had that hustle mentality as well as like, how can I make sure I put aside money early on so that I can save and invest because it's going to set me up for success.
100%.
Now,
100%.
thinking about that, obviously, as especially your income level may go up and as everybody's income level throughout the years may
Hopefully.
go up, there's always that, lifestyle creep that can happen,
Yes.
lifestyle inflation. How do you go about deciding or at least pausing and making a decision when it comes to larger expenses?
No, that's a great question, Mo. And that, in fact, I actually made a whole dedicated video on that, I think about 2 years ago, called I'm Not Rich, I'm Wealthy. And the point of that video was talking about how, look, I at that point I had recently crossed the $1 million threshold in terms of my real estate, in terms of my stock portfolio, everything. My net worth crossed $1 million. And at that point I was probably like 30 to 31 years old when I made that video. And the main thesis of that video was I'm not special. I never had a high income job. Like the highest salary I ever had in any given year, I believe was 90K, like right before. And that was when I had my full-time job plus side business and stuff, right? So, I know people who make multiple times more than I did, but in terms of net worth, I'm probably still ahead of them because I always say it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And if I were to have, and I've said this many times, but like I'm not special. I don't think I'm a genius or anything. But if I were to have one superpower, I think it's what you described. I've been able to avoid lifestyle creep. Even as my income has grown generally year after year, right? Ups and downs, but generally my income grows every year. I'm able to maintain my same status of living, my same lifestyle expenses, right? I mean, I could have years ago, I could have, sold my first car and bought like a Mercedes Benz. I could have done that, but I didn't do that. I still drive my first car, my 2015 Hyundai Elantra, right? She's great. Like she does everything I need her to do. I could upgrade, but why? Why drop? I mean, why spend potentially what 40, 50,000, $60,000 on a new car that what looks a little bit better, maybe drives a little bit smoother? Is it really going to make my life happier? No. $40,000, that's half of a down payment. I could buy another rental property with that. I could max out my FHSA. I could max out my child's RESP if I had a child. I could top up my TMSA and RSP and max out all my tax sheltered accounts and give myself a huge jumpstart of tax sheltered investment income. Rather, on the other hand, if I bought a car, I'm buying a grossly depreciating asset that would lose 30% of its value every single year, right? So for me, if I had one kind of quality that separates me from the rest, it's that resilience and that discipline to realize this. It's really not that hard, but it's hard for people to kind of our human brains are able to kind of convince ourselves that whatever decision we make is the right decision. So it's very tempting when you get a salary raise. Hey, if I get a $10,000 bonus, I'm gonna buy myself a $5,000 gift for myself, right? And it's so easy for your brain to kind of rationalize that, be like, hey, I made another 10K, so I'm already
That's right.
5K ahead. I can afford this, right? But the way I may be wired differently, whether this was I was born this way or I was through training, probably a combination of both, is that I was very happy earning $60,000 a year. My life, I loved my life, right? I was able to, afford general things, not luxuries, but general a comfortable life. Now, if I make an extra 10K, an extra 5K, is I was still happy at 60K salary, making 65K salary. I don't need to spend an extra 5K. I'll still live like I did on the 60K salary. And now I just have an extra 5K to invest and buy myself future freedom. For me, what I really value is not material things. Even if anything, I value more like experiences, like, traveling or skydiving or bungee jumping or those kind of things, making memories. That's what I really value. But for me, my main goal is freedom, right? I'm working towards financial freedom. I'm working towards to getting to a point where I can choose to retire before I'm 40. And thankfully, because I've made those sacrifices, I've kept my expenses low, I've maintained my lifestyle even for years and years, even as my income has grown. I never upgraded my car. I never upgraded my apartment. I lived in student housing all throughout my 20s. I didn't live alone
Amazing.
until 30 years old,
Yeah.
right? And obviously, that was a sacrifice. I would have loved to
Yes.
live alone. Everyone wants privacy and whatnot, right? But think about how much money I saved for a decade, right? I was paying from anywhere from $250 a month up to a maximum of $550 a month. That was the most rent I ever paid in my 20s. Compare that to some kids who, like, fresh out of school at 22 years old, they're paying $2,500, $3,000 a month on rent because they want the privilege of having an apartment downtown Toronto, right? Obviously, it's fun to live in an apartment downtown Toronto, but you don't need that. Like you can live with roommates. I'm testament to that. I lived in student housing with like students until I was 30 years old. And I saved so much money. And because of that, I was able to invest an extra $2,000 every single month compared to the average people my age. So I might be getting away from your original question, but the point being is that if I had one secret or one kind of quality that really kind of helped lend me to my success and is really helping me accomplish my goal of retiring before the age of 40, it's that. It's that I was always able to keep my expenses low, live below my means, and invest the rest. And any new money that would come in, any new revenue, to me, that's money that I don't need to spend. I'm not even giving that as an option. I'm happy maintaining my current status of life and investing everything else that comes in. And that is really the name of the game. investing consistently and try to increase your investment rate, right? If you can do that with various ways, right? One is through drips, like what with drips and compounding, your money's kind of growing and accelerating on autopilot. If you could do the same thing with your revenue and your expenses, now you're unstoppable. You're going to be years or even decades ahead compared to your peers who are
100%.
just investing, the bare minimum, if at all.
It's amazing. I think a lot of your knowledge of the tax systems, your knowledge of essentially taking that time to step back, just because majority of people go through life and do the typical things, like, you
Mm.
earn a higher salary, you naturally have to upgrade. You kind of take that moment to pause, like, do I absolutely need that? And if I don't need that, and whatnot, how better I can actually allocate my money so that it works for me, and you have bigger goals that you're very
Exactly.
focused on.
One thing I do want to mention also, like let's be real. I also have the privilege. Well, you can call it privilege, but like let's recognize it, right? Like I am, relatively a single guy, right? I don't have a wife depending on
Right.
me. I don't have kids depending on me yet, right? So I was able to kind of make those some of them extreme
Yeah.
sacrifices, like living with roommates, living in student housing. Obviously, yeah, if you're, it's a little bit different as a male versus as, if you're like a 29-year-old female, you don't have any friends, you're living in a stranger of, a house full of students, right? You might not have that option. Or likewise, if you have a kid, if you have a family, you have kids depending on you, you might not be able to, live in student housing, right? So, you know, I definitely recognize that, like me not having kids, me not having a family, me being very independent, no one depending on me, has afforded me those opportunities to really keep my expenses low and make those sacrifices. But don't feel bad if that's not you, right? And also, I'm the kind of person where I don't crave material things. I'm happy living very frugally and very cheap, right? But for you, if you have different goals, different priorities, if spending money on fancy food genuinely gives you joy, then God bless. Have fun with that as long as you budget for it and you're responsible for your money. What I don't want people to do is feel compelled to spend money that they don't have because it's expected of them or to impress their friends or family. That's bullshit. That's BS. You have to get that thought out of your head. The sooner you realize that thought, the better. It's your money. Be intentional with your money. Spend your money or invest your money. But if you are going to spend your money, spend it on things that genuinely give you joy, right? Buying fancy clothes, if you like fancy fashion, great. And that's a hobby of yours, great. But if you're just buying the latest fashion just to impress your friends, you need new friends, right? Like honestly, like I can show you a tour of my closet. It's all t-shirts. It's all $20 t-shirts or free t-shirts like I got from Blossom, right? So like for me, fashion doesn't matter. Fashion doesn't bring me joy. What does bring me joy is experiences, traveling, frankly, like investing. Investing gives me such a thrill because whenever I put that money aside to buy, in my TFSA, I know that I'm not just buying a stock. I'm buying freedom. I'm literally buying years of my life that I will be able to eventually retire, sit on a beach if I want to, and just collect dividends, right? So it's really important, I think, to do an honest self-assessment, sit down and realize and come to the realization what genuinely brings me joy and be very intentional with your money. And if you want to spend money on things or experiences or, whatever hobbies you have, that's totally fine. Just make sure you budget for it and you have a plan and you know exactly how much money is coming in and how much money is coming out. If you just kind of spend willy-nilly and then hope for the best at the end of the month when the credit card statement comes in, that's a recipe for disaster, right?
Yeah.
So be intentional with your spending.
Super, super sage advice. And Adrian, investing and saving and personal finance can be at times a lonely journey, especially
Yes,
money topic is not something that is very widely talked about. Thanks to you and others like Brandon Beavis and many other amazing financial influencers that we have. I
yourself
mean,
included.
appreciate it. The topic is being discussed, but I know there was the void, and obviously that's where Blossom really created a fantastic
Yes.
community. I know early on you were involved in Blossom. Now
Yeah.
it's been multiple years since then.
Yeah.
What role do you see that communities such as Blossom can play in bringing folks together and hopefully encouraging them to get started on this journey of saving and investing for their own future?
I always say, like, for me, I've been on YouTube for 7 years, right? So I've seen the rise and fall of different creators. I've seen the ups and downs. I've seen the algorithm change. There have been times where I felt burnt out, and I'm like, no one's watching my videos anymore, or I'm feeling demotivated. I've wanted to quit many, many times, right? But I always felt the kind of responsibility to my audience because people did trust me and people were following me for years, and I felt a duty, an obligation to them to keep going until I've passed all my lessons, right? That I've learned. But when Blossom came around, Blossom was the one moment where it was really life-changing for me. And I'm lucky because I joined the Blossom team very early on. I started building a friendship with Brandon Beavis, who again was one of my biggest heroes, and becoming friends with one of my heroes was an amazing personal journey for me. And then he introduced me to Max, the CEO of Blossom. And within our first, we had like maybe an hour and a half meeting. It was a perfect fit. Like me, Max, and Brandon, we got along so well. We were so aligned. Max is such like an impressive guy. Like he's kind of like what you said. Like he's such a friendly, approachable guy, but he's also like he's brilliant. And I used to think I work hard until I met someone like Max. Like Max is he lives, breathes, sweats, cries Blossom, dreams Blossom. We'll be traveling on tour. He'll have a 15-minute break at the airport at security, and he'll pull up his laptop and start writing the Blossom Weekly Buzz. You know what I mean? Like he's always working for Blossom. It's amazing. So when I first met Max and discussing Blossom, I think Blossom just crossed 5,000. That was over 3 years ago. And now we have over 500,000 users. We have
Yeah,
almost 600,000 users, right? So
incredible.
it's been an amazing journey. And to answer your question, the reason that I fell in love with Blossom, the Blossom community is, well, Mo, really like people like you, right? But it's like, here's the thing. There was there was already at that point, this is maybe three years ago, there were a few kind of siloed communities in the Canadian investing landscape, right? We had some Reddit forums, we had some Facebook groups, and then we had various kind of content creators with their own kind of community. So we had my community, Brandon Beavis, we had, Daniel Prong, we had Jessica Morehouse, Plain Bagel, Humble Trader, right? So there were a couple of pockets of different communities, and there was definitely some overlap between them, right? No question. But there wasn't really one unified place where everyday Canadians could really just kind of come together and share their opinions. And also, let's be real, like, even if you go to my YouTube comments, for example, I'll use mine as an example. Excuse me. I take a lot of pride in the fact that I respond to every single comment, right? But and even though my community has grown and I love my viewers because a lot of times someone will ask a question and then someone
Each other.
else will jump in and answer it for me before I even get a chance to. And it'll be like a nice dialogue growing between them, right? And I love that. But generally speaking, most of the engagement in my community is someone asks a question and then I answer, and then maybe someone else will jump in. And then we have like a relatively small, 3 to 4 person discussion in the comment threads, which I love. And I'm very grateful for that and proud of that. But with Blossom, it's totally different. Like with Blossom, it's not dominated by a handful of big voices like me or Brandon, right? It started that way for sure. When we first started, the key ambassadors, like I think it was, me, Brandon Beavis, BD Investing, I'm probably missing some people. So my name's Humble Trader, right? They were passive income investing. They were kind of the early on voices, right? But the amazing thing I've learned, I've kind of observed over the years is that everyday people who didn't have a social media following, they didn't even they weren't classically trained in the finance industry. They were just everyday people. They started posting regularly and building an audience, building a following, building a sense of credibility and trust within the Blossom group, right? And then people like, I mean, you're always a good example I point to, but Mo, like, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Blossom was kind of your first outlet to kind of build an audience, build a community of people to trust you. And then through Blossom, you kind of carry that forward to YouTube and other kind of avenues, right?
Yeah, Blossom was really helpful in terms of like growing for sure that audience. Absolutely. And I
Right?
love using Blossom too.
And I love that because, like, for me now, it really shows that it's kind of come full circle. Where at the early stages of Blossom, it was YouTubers coming on and bringing people together, and then growing the Blossom community. And now it's kind of flipped. Now it's the Blossom community has organically grown on their own, and from that, a few kind of key voices have grown from Blossom. And they're Blossomers first, YouTubers second. I was a YouTuber first, Blossomer second. So seeing that switch And seeing that purely organically, that wasn't like a strategic thing. We didn't like, the algorithm didn't like, make that happen. That was a purely organic, natural movement of the community rallying behind a few people and a few key voices like yourself, really being consistent and being really welcoming and generous with your time. Like Mo, I always tell use as an example. Whenever there's a new user on Blossom, they're like, "Oh, who should I follow?" I'm like, "Follow Mo." Like if you listen to Mo, Mo will be like, if he doesn't have the answer for you, well, first of all, Mo, people like you will sit down and respond to like almost every single comment on Blossom, and I know better than most how much time that takes, and and I know more than most, like how much the new users, the new investors appreciate that. Having someone sit down and take the time to actually respond to the questions in a patient and understanding way, not a condescending or judging way, like, oh, what, you don't know that? How do you not know that yet? You do such a great job of kind of walking people through step by step from the very beginning. And one thing I will always give you credit for is if you don't know the answer to something, or if you know someone else who might know the answer better, more specialized that field, you always kind of give credit where credit is due. And you always kind of lead people, be like, hey, check out Brandon Beavis's video, or check out so-and-so's post on Blossom, because they're a great resource for this kind of investing, right? And you're not alone in that. I mean, you're one of the rare kind of like gems that I kind of like to point to, but there's dozens of people like you, right? Who are just everyday people on Blossom, and you guys really do take pride in the community and help foster that environment of learning and growth without ego, without bragging or competing with each other. It's really, I'm just kind of long-winded answer to your original question, but if there's one thing that made Blossom special, it's the fact that it's a community for everyone. It's not
100%.
a place that's dominated by a handful of voices. You get people from all across Canada and now all across the US too, and now we're
Yeah.
expanding to other countries too, but you get so many different schools of thought. Some people who are, investors for decades. Some people who just started investing literally 5 minutes ago. People from Nunavut, people from Newfoundland, people from, Winnipeg,
Name it. Yeah.
all across Canada, all across US. And, it's, I don't think there's anything else like it. I think it's the first of its kind, at least that I've seen in Canada, where we've had such a Canadian focused and now US focused as well community of just everyday people who are there, excuse me, they're just to help each other out,
Yeah.
help each other grow. And unlike things like Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, where it's all anonymous and you don't know if these guys are
Hmm.
talking out of their ass, right? Like they could be bragging about, oh, I 10x this stock. How do we prove that? You can Photoshop a screenshot,
Yeah.
right? On Blossom, if you choose to, you can link your portfolio. And then that way it really does lead credibility. And I always warn people, especially as the content creator space has exploded, right? When I started, there were only like a handful of voices. Now, everybody with a microphone is a content creator, right? So, and a lot of them are great, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them, they have ulterior motives and you probably shouldn't trust them. A great way to kind of gauge that trust, that credibility is, do they practice what they preach? Right. And Blossom allows that, because if there's someone who's constantly talking about, risky mining IPO stocks, right? And then you go on Blossom and they don't own any of that. I mean, then you wonder, wait, are they being paid to promote these
Hmm.
penny stocks? Do they have some kind of a financial incentive to promote these stocks? Because they talk a big game saying, oh, this is going to 10x, but they don't own it themselves, right?
Hmm.
Or if they do, they're hiding that fact, right? With Blossom, it really does kind of build that spirit of transparency, right? Practice what you preach. Every stock that I ever talk about, you can go in my Blossom portfolio and
Yeah.
see that I do in fact own it, right? And not just me. Most of the content creators that I trust and respect are follow that kind of mold, right? And at the same time, if you see someone who is kind of like, bragging about, oh, I doubled my money, well, it's easy to say that, right? Without any evidence. On Blossom, you don't see dollar amounts, but you see percentage profits,
Right.
percentage allocations, and percentage returns, right? Now, all-time return is a total P&L. It doesn't really encompass everything. It mainly focuses on capital gains. It doesn't really count for dividends. That being said, it's still a good barometer. If someone's bragging about, being a genius investor, but they're down 15%, I mean, you should stop and think, hey, is this guy, is he legit, or is he just trying to like, boasts his public persona, and in
Yeah.
reality, he doesn't know what he's doing, right?
In
So
many ways, the Blossom definitely democratized like the investment community, right? It's like people
yes,
coming together. You didn't necessarily need like a degree of some sort to come and say, hey, I'm starting. You can ask a question. And for the most part, what I love about Blossom compared to like maybe some other communities, not as organized as here, but at least the the principles of respect is there.
yes.
If it's not there, typically like it's a power of the crowd. Like the crowd probably is gonna like tune you out. Like okay, well
Believe me,
yeah,
yeah.
if you're not gonna listen to you or whatnot, there are other features like as well added there. That's amazing. One other thing that is really amazing for me, Adrian, is the fact that how those Blossom tours, like how I see like last
Mm,
year I had the chance to attend for the first time, but
in
when I
Calgary,
see
yeah.
it like compared to previous years, how much it expanded. So many
Oh
more
my God,
cities, and
yeah.
I think you attended pretty much all of them. If
No, no. So far,
yeah,
me and Max hold the record. We've attended every single event.
wow, it's amazing.
Brandon missed one. He didn't go to Winnipeg. But to his credit, Winnipeg wasn't an official
Yes, it was
Blossom
not.
event. It was actually our first community event where
Yeah.
Perry, who's also one of our
Yes.
rising stars in the Blossom community,
Yeah.
he organized a Winnipeg event. And
Yeah.
Winnipeg is, a relatively small city. We
Smaller.
don't have that
Yeah.
many users there. But when we went to that event, me and Max did, and Perry was kind of the main speaker there. I was amazed. There was like 100 people at
Wow.
Winnipeg. And again, that wasn't Blossom wasn't involved. We didn't organize, we didn't even advertise it. That was just Perry and the Winnipeg Blossom community
That's
rally
incredible.
behind this event, right? So you're right. Like that, I've been to every single event as well as Max, and Brandon has pretty much been to every
Yeah.
event,
That's
right?
amazing. All the official
But,
ones.
but you're right, man. Like I mean, I met you for the first time this year in Calgary. We've been doing it 3 years in a row now,
It's
and I
incredible.
remember, like, for example, our first year in Toronto. Toronto's always our biggest event, which makes sense. It's the biggest city in Canada, it's our flagship event, but our first event 3 years ago was at the Rec Room, when we had about maybe, like, 350 people. Our next year was at an outdoor event at Stacked Market, basically double. We had about 700, maybe 800 people, and then this year was at the Sky Dome at the Rogers Centre.
It's
We had, like,
incredible.
1,500 people, right?
Wow.
I remember I joked at our 3 years ago at a Rec Room event. I joked to Max. I was like, because we were at I don't know if you know Toronto well, but the Rec Room is across the street from the Sky Dome,
No
right?
way.
And I
Yeah.
joked to Max. I was like, yo, in a couple of years, we're gonna be doing our venue at the Sky Dome.
Oh, that's
And 2 years later, we did it, right?
yeah.
And that's just such a visceral, visual
Yeah.
representation of how quickly the community has grown and how much it's really taking on a life of its own. Yes, we do a good job of promoting it and broadcasting it, but it's mainly word of mouth. It's just everyday people telling their friends, being like, hey, I got to meet Brandon Beavis last year. I got to meet Joy Yang. I got to meet Humble Trader. I got to meet BD Investing. I got to meet Mo last year, right? These guys are so cool in real life. You have to come this year, right? And then next year, they bring their friends, they bring their
Yeah.
family.
100%.
I can't tell you how many people I met this year on tour who were like, "Oh, I've been here. I've seen you, 3 years in a row,
Mhm.
but this year I brought my friend, and he's like brand new to investing." And I'm like, "Yo, that's so cool, right?" And now you're expanding your instead of like being selfish and hogging that financial knowledge, right? You're bringing your friends in because you want everyone in your life to kind of benefit the way
Yeah.
you benefit, right? You want to share that knowledge, share those lessons, and that's what I really love about Blossom, right? It's not about, I'm so smart. Here's how smart I am. Here's how rich I am. No, no, no. It's not about that. It's about, here's what I've learned. Here's some mistakes I've made. Here's also some great, positive lessons and positive steps I've made. I want to share my journey so that hopefully someone else can learn from it. And let's discuss in the comments below. What
Learn
did I
more.
do wrong? Is there something
Yeah.
I could do better? Right. And I've never met a community where people are so willing to kind of put their ego aside and just help each other out, just support each other. Even someone who's brand new to investing, it's so easy for someone to be like, hey, I've been investing for 10 years. If you're a brand new beginner, I'm not going to waste my time with you. You need to kind of do the homework first. You have to earn your place to ask a question. No, I don't, no, no. That's BS. In Blossom, whether you've been investing for 5 minutes or 5 decades, we want to hear what you have to say and ask your questions and don't be shy. There's going to be I used to say dozens. Now at this point, hundreds, even thousands of
Yeah.
people who will jump in and
100%.
and will voluntarily give up their time to help you out or point you in the direction of maybe a YouTube channel or an online resource to learn better, to learn your specific circumstance.
And what I love about it as well
I
is,
keep more proud of that.
yeah, and Adrian, what I love as well about Blossom is that, that sense of community and also the importance and the emphasis that they have put on the education. I know when I last talked to Brandon and Max, they both spoke very highly about it as well. And we see there's a whole dedicated section called Learn, which we have like courses, we have a lot of useful materials. And
Right.
Blossom app has evolved so much, like compared to a few years ago. Like,
It's
and
amazing,
it's
man.
amazing how
You've
they
been with us.
listen to the community.
Well, remind me, what you've been? You might have been on Blossom even before I did. I don't
No, I
know, but
don't think so. No, actually,
I
funny
joined
enough,
when I was about 5,000 users. But Mo, you were one of like the first like Blossom first people where I recognize your name, and I kept seeing your name pop up in the
yeah,
comments.
yeah,
And
but
I'm like,
not
yo,
before
this
you. I think I was not before there for
okay, but
sure.
you were
Yeah,
early on. You were definitely like
for sure early on.
one
Yeah,
of the
definitely a few years
the
ago.
first
Yeah,
batch.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean, it's amazing to see how it's evolved and has grown
it's
so much.
true.
Adrian,
And
I don't
you've
want
gotten a
to.
chance to meet so many people
Yeah.
on
Oh, it's
Blossom
just
in real life, right?
that was, this is one thing I absolutely loved it. I never knew how valuable those interactions are gonna be until I
Right.
attended that event, and to me it was like, wow, like I've got so much value from obviously interacting on Blossom, but man, like it. I loved
In
it so much
person.
that I almost made it like a pledge to myself. I didn't tell anybody, but like, if I family and life allows me, I would like to continue coming. I think it's
Yeah.
just amazing. It's one of those ones because you meet your heroes for sure. Like, I mean, meeting you is amazing. Brandon Beavis,
I got to be my
Joey,
heroes too. Yeah.
so many. It's just and seeing how like to me, I appreciate when I see how humble people are. Like, and it just makes it so much nicer. It's just like the friendship that you make and all the learnings. The panels are just fantastic. Like, you were on the panel and others,
You
just so
hosted a panel.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I have a few quick rapid fire question, if I may, and also one surprise question that's been asked from my previous guest. So you don't definitely know
Can I
that
know who the
question.
guest was?
I will probably share you offline, but not on the call. Yeah. Let
Fair.
them remain anonymous. Yeah. So let's go with the rapid fire question. So meant to be quicker as well.
I'll try to keep it short.
Yeah.
Cut me
If
off
you want to
before I
add
go
like
off.
one or two sentences in terms of your rationale, that's totally okay too. So
Perfect.
the first one, dividends or growth?
Both. I mean, it's not one or the other. They each have their uses. As you get older or as your circumstances change, your goals change, you might want to move more towards dividends or vice versa. But it's not black or white. A mix of both. That's what I do.
Yeah. Cashback credit cards or travel rewards?
They're both very valuable. For me, I prefer the simplicity of cashback. I don't want cashback works because no matter what, I get that money every year, right? With rewards, if you do it the right way, you can get even better benefits, but it's not, you have to do the research. You have to really understand how to redeem those points and how to earn those points in the most efficient way. So yeah, I prefer cashback for simplicity, but they both have their purpose.
Best money decision you've ever made?
Wow. Honestly, I mean, this is probably back to first year university. Just making an Excel file where I tracked every single expense and I tracked every single source of income. Literally, I've had that same Excel file that I've updated over the years. I've changed the format, but that's been the single most pivotal change in the way I think about money, right? Because until you really know where your money's going, you're not going to be able to make a change, right? Because you can make a very vague change, like I want to start saving more money. What does that mean? How do you measure that? Did you accomplish your goal or not, right? Once you start tracking every expense and every income, now you have quantifiable numbers. I invested 30% of my income this year, or I spent more than I brought in this month. I don't want to be in that position again. And now you have those numbers. Now you can kind of use those numbers to build real goals that you can hold yourself accountable to, right? So that's, I think, the most important thing. Track your expenses, track your income, and then be more mindful with your money, how it's coming in and how it's going out.
Super important. I know as a frugal person, typically it's hard to spend money on certain things. It
Yes.
depends on things that you value. But what is one thing that you've spent probably a little bit more than typical? Let's say you've splurged on it, but you don't regret.
For me, it was laser eye surgery about almost 2 years ago now. I actually made a whole video about that. Because
Yes,
for
I
me,
remember.
that to me, I kind of framed it in my mind as a personal investment.
Yes.
And yes, I mean, I spent close to $7,000 on that surgery, right? Which by
They're not cheap.
far
Yeah.
is the biggest expense ever, other than my car. My car, I think, was worth 12 grand when I bought it. I got 10 years
Still
ago.
very, cheap though.
You know me, I'm frugal. It was a used
Yeah.
car. It was a manual car because
Yeah.
I saved $5,000 because
Yeah.
people in Canada couldn't drive manual. So I'm like, well, I didn't know how to drive manual either, but I bought the car and I learned the hard way how to drive it, right? But no, that laser eye surgery was by far my biggest expense other than my car. But oh my God, it was so worth it. I mean, it was life changing. I've been wearing glasses every day since I was a teenager. And, it was part of my look. It was part of my brand. On my face
Yeah.
on YouTube, I was always the guy with
Yeah.
glasses, right? But now, I mean, I'm a very active person. I love running. I love swimming. I can now I could play basketball without worrying about, my glasses being smacked off my face and broken, right? So for me, laser eye surgery, man, I wish I did it sooner. If I had the money, I would have done it sooner, right? But that to me was an investment, a personal investment, a big expense, but one I do not regret because it literally has been life changing.
Yeah. That's and it goes back to what you value and how
Yeah.
it impacted your life.
And it wasn't like a spur of the moment thing. It was something I
Y-
planned for. I had another savings fund set aside for this, right?
Smart.
So that I knew that I didn't want that to be a credit card expense. I didn't
Yeah.
want that to be like, a surprise $7,000 credit card bill. That's going to rack up interest for months and months
Mhm.
until I can pay it off.
Mhm.
This way I planned ahead. I saved money up. So I was able to pay pretty much all in cash right up
Yeah.
front.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, knowing you, I know you, I believe you do, you're smart in this, sorry, smart in my assessment of like trying to use credit cards in a responsible
Yeah,
way. So I know,
absolutely.
like, for example, you have spoken very highly about, like, for example, being able to use the services such as Chexy as an
Sexy.
example, because then you can rack up those points or rewards. But at the end of the day, it always comes with being a responsible user of the credit card
That's
first.
the most important thing. You asked about cashback or points earlier. It can be really enticing and really exciting to kind of fall into that world of maximizing points, maximizing cashback, right? But there's no cashback or points out there that is worth a 20% or 25% interest working against you if you don't pay your credit card statement. So no matter what, if you can't afford to buy it in cash, don't buy it. Doesn't matter what the credit card bonus is. You have to always pay your credit card statement in full every single month. Like you said, I use my credit card for everything. I literally now use it for my rent. I even use it for my tax bill, my tax installments, right? And because of that, I'm able to save literally thousands of dollars a year on cashback. But I have never spent a single penny in interest. Why? Because even when I was a student, I always paid my credit card statement in full every single month. That was a non-negotiable, right? And I know it's easy, especially when people are young and they're maybe they're right out of school or maybe they're in school. You're always inundated with like credit card emails or credit
Offers,
card
yeah.
advertisements promoting like, oh, a crazy sign up bonus, right? And then you might not know how credit cards work, and then you fall into the credit card debt cycle, and it's so hard to get out of. But I actually made a video many years ago about like the 7 steps to build wealth, and literally the very first step is get rid of your credit card debt. Don't even think about investing. Don't even think about emergency fund. Like if you're in credit card debt, the whole point of an emergency fund is to avoid credit card
Yeah.
debt. So if you're already there, I mean, paying off your credit card debt is a guaranteed rate of return of 20%. There's no investment out there that's a guaranteed 20%. The only one is paying off that debt and then staying out of debt for the rest of your life. That's the number one most important step I would say for anyone. If you're in that position, do whatever you can. Work a side job, cut your expenses, ration your meals, whatever you need to do to pay off that credit card debt, and then make a promise to yourself, never again. I will never again fall into this hole of paying 25% interest to the credit card companies. Only use your credit card like a debit card. If you don't have the cash, don't buy it.
Super, super important. And essentially,
Yeah,
with credit cards, is compounding working against you. You definitely don't want that
literally.
at all, right? Yeah. Adrian, is there one financial book that I mean, resonates with you the most? Maybe if an investor comes,
Boy,
hey, is there one that you can recommend? What jumps out at you?
there's so many that I loved. I mean, there's ones that were really inspiring for me because I read
Yeah.
them at an early age. So the classics like I read Wealthy Barber Returns, I
Uh-huh.
read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which again is one of those classic. It's one of those books where um I don't want to. It's one of those books where it can really like Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'll use that as an example.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lessons in there that can really kind of reframe your mindset towards entrepreneurship. But it's also a book where I caution people don't blindly follow everything that Robert says in the book because he's a bit of a wild card and I think he's a very, very, very high risk individual, way more than the average person. So that's one of those books where I say, like, take some inspiration from it, but don't just blindly follow everything he says. He uses debt in a borderline irresponsible way, I would say, right? So books that I think would benefit everyone, especially Canadian focused, Beat the Bank by, I believe, Larry Bates, I believe. That's a great book where he really focuses on the cost of mutual funds and how much these banks will kind of trick you and convince you that, they're working for your best interest. They're really not. In the long run, if you run the calculations and
Yeah.
he gives you these graphs, mutual funds, and you might think, oh, they're only taking 2.5%. No. Out over the course of 20, 30 years, they're literally robbing like 40% of your money. And they're taking that money in fees because it's compounding, it's accumulating.
Yeah.
And the most crazy thing is that whether they make you money or they lose you money, they still take
Absolutely.
their fee, right? So they really don't have a financial incentive to make you money. They don't really care. They're just gonna, minimize their fees and extract their 2.5% from
Hmm.
you, and they keep the difference, right? Granted, is mutual funds better than non-investing at all? Yes, I would say so. But one of my lessons that I learned very early on, I mean, I started with mutual funds. I think most people did as well.
Yeah. Same as
Within the
me.
first like 8 months, I realized, wait, what are they really doing for me?
Yeah.
And once I opened up their annual statement, it was like a 40-page document. And I had to get down to like page 18 until I saw exactly how much in fees they were taking from me. And once I saw that, I was like, hell no. Like, what am I paying them for? Right? I could literally make the exact same portfolio just with ETFs
Fraction
and
of the
literally
cost.
pay 20 times less, 30
Yeah.
times less. Like, instead of paying, 3% in annual fees, I could pay 0.03% with something like VOO
Yeah.
for the exact same portfolio, the exact same goal, exact same objectives, all that stuff, right? So Beat the Bank is a great one. Also, another one I want to give a shout out to is The Psychology of Money.
Yeah.
And it's an investing book, but it's also just like a mindset of money, right? How to live below your means, how to keep your expenses low. There's a whole chapter on like the distinction between rich versus wealthy, right? And how rich is loud, rich is lavish experiences, rich is having a fancy sports car. Wealthy can be silent, right? There's the famous story in that book about the janitor from, I think, Minnesota or something, where he lived a minimum wage job. He was a janitor for 40 years and he died a multimillionaire, and he donated like $3 million to the local library. And everyone was shocked. They thought, like, how's this guy making the money? Is he like, like a Breaking Bad Walter White, like, meth cook? No, he was just living below his
Diligence.
means
Yeah.
and investing in broad ETFs for 30 years. And like I said earlier, he wasn't a genius. He just invested in quality stocks, quality ETFs, and he let time do the rest. And he was able to retire a multimillionaire as a janitor. So, like, for me, stories like that are so inspiring and so like resonating because, if I could do it, if he could do it, anyone could do it. All you need is discipline, consistency, and patience. Focus on the long term. That's the name of the game.
100%. Super, super important. Adrian, I really appreciate all your advice that you've shared. For the surprise question, given that we
Okay.
are early in the year, my previous guest wanted me to ask this question. And the question was, you know, typically in the beginning of the year, that's a perfect time for us to start thinking or maybe setting a goal. And we are in 2026. So have you set a goal, financial
Yeah.
or otherwise, specifically for 2026? And if yes, what are the steps that you are taking to make sure you can achieve that goal?
Great question. Yeah. So I'm a very goal-oriented person, right? I think if you're gonna be a person who wants to strive for to be different than the herd, if you want to kind of make your own path, whether that's entrepreneurship, whether that's, excelling at your job, excelling at your as being as a parent, as a spouse, right? Whatever your goal is, if you want to be exceptional and not follow the herd, you have to be goal oriented. Because even if you're fucking Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan wasn't born the best, right? Like, if you like he got to where he was because he pushed himself harder, and he set such a high standard for himself that he worked harder than anyone else on that court to accomplish his goals and get to where he was, right? So being goal oriented is essential in all areas of life, especially career and personal finance and entrepreneurship, right? So one of my goals is, I mean, financial goals. I want to max out all of my tax sheltered accounts this year. Priority is always going to be the FHSA, so the first home savings account, because you get all the benefits of both the TFSA and the RRSP all wrapped into one. So I got to put $8,000 into my FHSA this year. I should be, as long as I'm consistent, I could definitely accomplish that. My TFSA, we got another $7,000 of room this year, plus the remaining room I had from previous years. Maxing that one out, I hope I can accomplish. RRSP, that one's the real challenge because I think for a lot of Canadians, you're gonna have more RSP room than all your other accounts because you
Builds
get
up
that
value. Yeah.
18% of your income every year.
Yeah.
So with the TFSA, the maximum you can get every year is really 7,000 of new room. RRSP, you can get, depending on your income, you can get up
Yeah.
to like
Way higher.
$33,000 of
Yeah.
RSP room, depending on your income, right? So maxing on my TFSA, I think I should definitely be able to accomplish that. FHSA, I will definitely accomplish that this year. Maxing on my RRSP, that one's a challenge, but I'm aiming to max out all three, and my goal is literally the same as I've been repeating again and again: consistency. Every single month, I'm gonna live below my means. Every single month, I'm gonna try to invest as much as I can. Whether that's $1,000 a month, maybe $2,000 this month, whatever I can. If I have a particularly good month where I have good income coming in, I'm gonna try to invest maybe $2,500 this month if I can. So that's kind of my main financial goal. Personal goal, a big one for me this year is just working on balance, right? So I've been on YouTube for 7 years. I've been really devoted the past 7 years, I've really been like all in on YouTube. It's been my main priority. It's kind of taken over my life in a lot of ways. Don't get me wrong, I love it. I still spend 2 to 3 hours a day responding to everyone's comments, right? And I love doing that, right? But I have to recognize I am getting older. These gray hairs aren't going away, right? I'm not a 20-year-old young guy anymore, right? Like I do want to kind of, maybe slow down a little bit, maybe take it a little bit easy. I don't have to stress so much about like I've been, with YouTube since I was kind of one of the early kind of, you know, pioneers in that space. There wasn't really a whole like it was really a fight for survival for many many years, right? Because money was never really secure. Views would go up and down, and
Mhm.
their ad revenue would go up and down. I didn't do sponsorships for the first 5 years on YouTube. I was only reliant on YouTube ad revenue and like affiliate signups. So what that means is when if I were to promote Questrade or a credit card and you sign up with my link, I would get like $50, right? So that was my main source of income. But that really went downhill after COVID, right? So I had to kind of really double down and work extra hard on my YouTube career, just kind of stay afloat, right? During the COVID years, it was easy being a YouTuber because everyone was at home,
Mhm.
there wasn't a lot of competition, and everyone was watching YouTube videos, right? So
Yeah.
I was getting crazy views, and the revenue kind of grew with that.
Spikes. Yeah.
But after COVID, and then with the rise of TikTok and the rise of other platforms like Blossom, right? People are getting their information from other avenues, right? So I've had to become way more creative with how I earn revenue, which is why in the past 2 years I started doing selective sponsorships, right? I would
Mhm.
only do sponsorships I only have 3 brands that I work with. Why? Because these are the 3 companies that I personally use, and I full-heartedly endorse them. Like I would recommend them to my friends and family. That's how I choose who to work with, right? I get sponsorship deals or offers dozens every single day, and I turn them all down because I'm like, I don't use them. Why would I sell your, I'm not gonna say junk, but why would I sell your unknown service
Mhm.
to my audience, risk my credibility for what? For a paycheck? Hell no, I'm never gonna do that, right? So I've had to become really creative and really, work my butt off to kind of survive after 7 years. Because like, as I mentioned earlier, you go periods of burnout, you get
Yeah.
exhausted, the algorithm changes, the money dries up. YouTube is not a way to get rich quick, right? Like for me, I didn't earn a single paycheck until about 2 years in. And even then, my first paycheck from Google was like, I think it was like $150, right? So it's not a livable wage for anything, right? You really need to be passion first. You have to love what you do. And then maybe if you're consistent and you build trust with your audience, you might be able to turn that into a source of income and then eventually a career the way I've done. But it's not easy. You have to make crazy sacrifices. Most people don't know that like for the first 5 years on YouTube, I never had a vacation. I never had a weekend off.
Wow.
I would work day and night, day and night. So I was still juggling a full-time job at the same time, right? So for me this year, I feel like I've finally gotten to the point where, hey, I've proven to myself that I can survive in the YouTube space, right? I've also built enough of an investment portfolio through real estate and stock market and whatnot that I don't need to feel like this fight for survival. I don't need to feel like I'm always just trying to keep my head above water. I'm in a relatively comfortable space. I'm well on track to reach my goal of retiring by the time I'm 40. So for this year, I want to start to slow down and work on balance in life, right? Like I don't
Mhm.
want to be doing all-nighters anymore. I don't want to be sacrificing sleep, working 20 hours in a row to edit a video and rush to get my deadline. Like I want to kind of, you know, find a more sustainable lifestyle
Yeah.
in the YouTube space. Still be consistent, still engage my audience, but not like kill myself over
Yeah.
stress and rushing out to make videos. If I'm a day late, I'm a day late. So what? In my head for years, I was always like, no, no, no. No matter what, I am
Have
launching the
to do.
video on Tuesday night, Tuesday afternoon, and I will sacrifice 2 days of sleep to reach that goal. Now this year, I'm gonna be like, you know what? Hey, let's take a step back. Let's work on balance. Let's work on health. Let's work on sustainability and balance in life. And that's my biggest goal for the year. It's going to be a change, but one that I am working towards.
I appreciate that, Adrian. And honestly, I think your audience, especially those who have followed you over the years, they appreciate that. Like, we are all humans. And honestly, I'm sure 99.9% of the followers are really like, wow. I mean, we were not even expecting you to actually go through all of that. But it's amazing as, like, for example, in your case, for you have that high target of like, I have to hold myself to the standard. So
Yes.
now coming in and sharing that, I'm sure the audience is going to appreciate it. And honestly, the point is, your videos have so much insight in them. They're packed with so much value
Thank you.
that honestly, like a lot of them, you want to watch multiple times just to actually like be able to like
It's true. Yeah.
get so much value. I remember like the taxes is one of my absolute favorites, and you dropped them as the almost perfect time. Like just enough time for folks to like, okay, if like you're getting closer to the year end, there's certain
Right.
time for you to make some adjustments, but also like being aware of that maybe for in the new year, how you want to strategize, maybe put aside some money, how you want to tackle
Exactly.
some other accounts. It's just perfect. And I love it how you have the playlist so nicely organized. So if somebody stumble upon your channel, let's say for the first time, they know where to begin, and they
Yeah.
can easily find the
No,
information. Like you've done such a good job there.
thank you, Mo, for saying that. I do appreciate that. And it's true. Like, there's a lot of things that here's the thing. I grew up on YouTube, right? YouTube came out when I was in high school. So I've been a fan of YouTube since day one, since 2006, right? So I know what myself as a viewer, what I look for in a channel, why how a YouTuber will gain my loyalty. And there's some YouTubers I've literally been following for 16 years, right? So I kind of aspire to be like that. I learned those lessons as a viewer first, as a fan first, and I tried to kind of emulate that for my audience. And as an example, you said like, if there's someone new to my channel, I do something that I don't think a lot of people do. I color code my thumbnail,
Yeah, it's
right?
amazing.
It seems so simple, but it's like
It's
it really
incredible.
does help navigate my channel, especially if you're brand new. If you've been following me for years, you've probably seen a lot of my videos. But if you're brand new, I have hundreds of videos over
Yeah.
the course of 7 years. So I have custom playlists. I have a Canadian tax guide. I have an investing guide for beginners. I have a video all about credit cards. I have a video all about real estate, a video all about how to start a business. And I color code them. Like my silver videos are my tax videos. My green videos are investing guides. My dark green videos are like walkthroughs. Blue videos are a breakdown of what stocks and ETFs I like to buy. Orange videos are credit card videos. So even something like that, like I don't really know too many other people in the finance space who do
I
that.
don't know. Yeah, it's actually
I think
very, very stand
it was
out.
something I planned out because I myself as a
Smart.
viewer knew that, hey, like I would appreciate this. And,
Yeah.
I remember I was watching people like Graham Stephan or Minority Mindset, for example. They were kind of big inspirations for mine.
Yeah.
And I kind of jumped into them like maybe like a year or two into their channel. And I was like, it was hard to go back even a year ago and see their old videos in the proper order. If you come back to my channel, like going back 7 years ago, those videos are a little hard to watch because the audio and video quality are crap, right? But like it can be hard to kind of like meet someone for the first time and like where do I start? It's like
Yeah.
it's overwhelming, right? So I do try to make those playlists that I put them in a specific order so that each lesson will kind of flow into the next. But thank you for calling that out, and thank you for
Yeah, of
if,
course.
if there's any new viewers who aren't aware of
Yeah.
me, I do recommend if you do want to check out my videos on YouTube, go to my playlists and watch them in that specific order, and you'll know. And whenever you see a video coming out, you'll know what the video is about because it's going to be color coded in the thumbnails.
Adrian, did you ever have to resist the temptation? Like a lot of the famous YouTubers like Graham Stephan, Minority Mindset, Andre Jake, over the years, they were always like their like the backgrounds and was fantastic. But over the years, you see like have a fancy car parked behind them
Oh,
and those fancy things. But I
true.
think what I love about you is that you never actually like, got into that like, oh, I have to. Your audience comes to you because of the value you bring in. It's not because of that fancy car parked behind them or the light. I'm not trying
No,
to say that they don't add value. I have a lot of valuable
of
contents,
course.
but I love how you've always stayed who you are. Like, honestly, I
It's
don't think you've
true.
changed anything.
No, thank you. No, it is true. Every single video I've ever filmed has been in my brother's living room,
Yeah.
right? At the same, my same bookshelf with all my books and video games back there. If you go back to my very first video, back from 2019, right? It's the exact same set, the same setup. I have a different microphone, I have a different camera, right? But it's the same bookshelf. And you know, the reason it's not like the thing is, it's not an act. Like I'm being genuine. This is who
Yes,
I am.
100%.
I'm not fancy guy. I don't have a sports car. I've had the same, my first car, I've had the same car for 10 years, Hyundai Elantra, right? I love video games. I love movies. I love books. Like what you see behind me is me. That's my authentic self, right? I'm as geeky, you see the t-shirts I wear. I'm as geeky and nerdy as you think I am, right? You can't, here's the thing. Now we're living in the nerd and geek era, right? Like 2026, for decades, the geeks and nerds were bullied and stuff. 2026, it's our era. You can't fake being a nerd, right? The nerd, you'll be able to, they'll suss you out, right? You have to be true to yourself, right?
That's
And I'm
amazing.
truly a nerd in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for saying that. And it is true. Like one thing I've really, really valued is that credibility, that authenticity, right? That transparency. And that's something I would never, ever, ever jeopardize with my audience, right? Why do people listen to me 7 years later? I mean, when there's people smarter than me out there. There's people who are more educated. There's people who are better investors. They might have better portfolios. They might be richer than I am. But the reason why they listen to me and voices like you is because we have that authenticity. We have that credibility. We're honest. We practice what we preach. We don't flip-flop between topics. You've probably seen as well, but I've seen a lot of content creators rise and fall over the years, especially during the COVID years, right? Where people might get really good views and then their views start to
They
go
totally
down.
stop or something. Yeah.
And then what do? They start switching topics. They go from a dividend investor to all of a sudden promoting NFTs or crypto, or even here's something that I'm not going to say any names, but I've seen this kind of phenomenon and it really kind of depresses me. Like a lot of people will start off being educators first. They're focusing on value. They're focusing on teaching, right? And then they might make one video where they kind of do like a bit of a venting session where they'll vent about how frustrated they are with the Canadian tax code or the Canadian government. They'll say like, oh, Canada's real estate industry is broken, or Canada's economy is in the gutter, right? And then those kind of like angry videos, those rage baiting videos, I'm sad to say they do very well, right? And you'll see a lot of content creators that realize like, oh, wow, I made this one video, I was just venting or whatever, and I got like 100,000 views. I'm going to do this from now on, right? And they go from being an educational, value-based creator towards like just a rage baiting, angry farming
Algorithm chaser
enter.
kind of thing, right?
And I'm not to say we should hold our government accountable. We should criticize, place people when they deserve it. But at the same time, you have to be productive, right? You have to just complaining and just, festering anger and animosity doesn't really solve any problems, right? Like it's easy to point out problems. The hard part is the next step.
Fixing.
What are the solutions, right? And let's work together to make those solutions. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that I've never really succumbed to that. I've seen a lot of people do that, and I get it. Like it is, when you make a video that goes viral, it's very tempting to kind of just like go all in and switch your whole focus and switch your brand and go all in on the one topic. But you really have to take a step back and reflect like, wait, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to maximize views, or am I doing this to, be true to myself and pass my knowledge and hopefully make a positive impact? I like to think that I make a positive impact with all my videos. Some of my videos, I might be a little bit more critical than others, but I always try to frame it in a positive, like hopeful light. Like I might be criticizing this one government policy, but here's what I want to see change different. Or here's one way we can use it to our advantage and hope for the best, right? That's something I've really I'm a very positive, optimistic person. I try to keep that.
Yeah.
A piece of advice to your viewers is if you are going to be loyal to someone, well, first of all, don't ever be blindly loyal to anyone online. Myself included, yourself included. We're just guys talking in front of a camera, right? Listen to what we have to say, understand our points of view, but take those lessons and then do your own research. Apply it to your own goals and your own situations, right? Never, ever, ever blindly copy my portfolio or do something just because Mo told you this is what I'm doing, what he's doing, right? we all have different goals, right? So you really need to kind of be selective with, first of all, who you trust online. And even number two, even if you do trust someone, never just copy them. Understand where they're coming from and then extract that information and apply it into your own life, which may or may not align with our goals, right? So it takes some work. Yes, there's some homework required. You do have to do some analysis, but that's the name of the game, right? It's your money. You make your own decisions, right? We're not going to do it for you, and it would be irresponsible for us to do it for you, right? So we're going to do what we can to help, but the onus is on you to kind of do your own homework, do your own research, and make the best decisions for you and your family.
100%, 100%. Adrian, you've been one of the most humble, authentic, responsible content creators that I've ever met.
Thank you.
Forever consider it as a privilege that having had the chance to meet with you, and again, super humble and grateful for you like spending a good almost 1.5 hours. I apologize, we went double the time that initially I had anticipated, but this conversation was so fun, and every time I talk to you, I'm learning something from you. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for all that you do. I want to, on behalf of all the Canadians who watch your videos, who follow you on Blossom or any other platform, thank you. I know it takes a lot of efforts and work. Like, you're just so kind. You're so amazing. Please keeping who you are, Adrian, because absolutely, we are all grateful for your authenticity and what value you bring to us. So thank you on behalf of all of our Canadians. I must say that for sure.
Thank you. That's so kind of you to say. I really do appreciate that. Thank you. And
yeah.
And the sentiment is returned, Mo. Like I said, you're an absolute gem, right? On Blossom, I always say you're one of the nicest guys on Blossom, right? And you're a testament of what I want the Blossom community to look like, right? I want everyone to be like Mo. And if everyone would just take a moment to be more like Mo, Canada would be a better place, especially the online world.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Adrian, for your time. I really appreciate it. We keep definitely following you on Blossom as well as all the other channels. Yes. Thank you so much. Wishing you all the best in the year.
Again. We'll do round 2.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Anytime.